podcast, definitely you can go first and I'll just take it from there. Yeah,
All
that's
right,
fine.
cool. Cool, cool, cool. All right. So as you know, I started off with a little mindfulness. So
Yes.
hey y'all, it's Queen J. We're back with another episode. This is a very, very special episode as we are going to be touching on something that I've hinted at us touching on for a while, but haven't actually done it yet because I wanted a special guest to talk about it with me. Um, so as you know, before we get into the topic, we always start with a bit of mindfulness. So with that being said, it is now time for us to pause, breathe, relax. It is now time for us to open our mind to explore learning about healing within this lifetime. It is now time for us to navigate new ways to discover how we can cope with healing and existing and growth and all things that come with this new reality that we're exploring. It is now time for us to be mindful and stay in the present with our growth and navigate some of the obstacles that come up when we are talking about healing and growth. All right, you guys. I hope that mindfulness set you guys at ease, gave you guys some peace, gave your soul some woosah moments. I hope that you guys are ready for this topic. So, we are going to be talking about the grief that comes up with healing. So, what I mean by that is when we're talking about healing, we often talk about like the happiness and how we have to let go of things and how we have to, kind of like transform into different things and do what's best for us. But a lot of those times we don't talk about the grief that comes up with that, meaning leaving friendships or having to leave behind people that no longer serve us, it's things like that. So I have a very special guest that I would like to introduce. Her name is Cindy Noir, and you may know her as the Bonnet Queen and all things, everything like that, with her own podcast called Can We Talk About It? So, Cindy, would you like to take it away?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm very, very excited to talk about this topic. Yes, my name is Cindy Noir. I am a motivational speaker as well as content creator, and I do have my own podcast called Can We Talk About It, where we talk about some of everything, the healing journey, be just growing into your 20s, growing into your own adulthood and defining it for yourself, relationships, friendships, and everything in between. So do check me out. But thank you so much for having me on your show today. I
Yes,
greatly appreciate it.
yes, of course. I am so happy that you could be a part of this. I was so nervous reaching out to you and everything, but I was like, I think this is gonna be a good little conversation. Like I've seen your stuff. The thing that I like about you is that you're authentic. So I felt
Thank
like we can
you.
have a really good conversation about this. So how would you like to start this off? Because I was just kind of thinking about in terms of like how do you just navigate around when the grief comes up and you're like, okay, I have to set this boundary for me, but I know
Mhm.
it's probably going to cause some distance with this individual, but I know I have to do it for me. And I'm going to have to probably grieve that relationship or the outcome of it. How do you navigate around that?
You know, I've just gotten to a point where you have to let it just suck for a little bit. I think that, people are so hell bent when it comes to healing and doing what's best for you. We focus so much on the fact that it's what's best for us, but we don't hold enough space for the fact that a lot of times what's best for us does not feel good to do in practice.
Woo!
In fact, most things that are best for us do not feel good to do in practice. And
Mm,
people say, oh yeah, it's hard to do, but you'll get past it, you'll be fine. Okay, that might be the truth. That might be true. It might be true that I'll get through it, and on the other side, I'm glad that I did it. However, getting through it sucks, and
yeah,
I think that one thing that I've done to honor my emotions and my experience is to let it suck for a little bit. Don't get stuck in
yeah,
the suck, but of course, let yourself feel the feelings of, man, I really wish this person would have just gotten it together, so I would have to do this, or man, I really wish that I was different, so that I would have to do this. There are a lot of emotions you'll experience when you're having to draw a boundary or remove yourself from somebody's life that you don't want to have to do that with. I think that there's a lot of misconception or assumption with the healing journey that when you embark on this journey of self improvement, the people
Mm.
you leave behind are people you didn't want around to begin with, and that is not true in my experience anyway. A lot of times,
No.
people you leave behind are close friendships, family members,
Mm-hmm.
people you never would have even imagined having to walk away from are the people you have to walk away from, and it's a very triggering experience when you realize, oh, you're the one I got to cut off. Like I thought, the acquaintance I had, that was easy, but you're talking about sometimes it's years long friendships that you realize
Yeah.
actually not that healthy for me, and I need better.
Mm-hmm.
That sucks. That's somebody you thought was gonna be your auntie to your kids one day, and now
Yes.
you realize this person
Yes.
doesn't need to be around anymore, and there is pain and there is mourning that happens with that. So I
Mm-hmm.
allow me to grieve. I mean, people think that once you cut the cord and you move on, you're fine.
Mm-hmm.
No, there are weeks after that. I'm thinking about that person still. They're on my mind. They're on my heart. It happens.
Yep.
And so
Yeah.
I allow myself to feel those emotions.
Uh-huh.
Don't get stuck in those emotions. But even as time goes on, when you carry those memories of that person and the good times and you reminisce and all of that, that's just part of the grieving process and it's going to
Yeah.
happen. And I just don't think it's talked about enough at all. So, yeah.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right because I was thinking about it from terms of like me personally. The previous episode that I did was talking about breaking attachments, and I was talking about how sometimes there are people in your life that you've outgrown, that their relationship or their role in your life no longer serves the person that you're becoming. And you have to make those choices where you're like, look, we need to sit down and have a conversation about this, or I just have to set this boundary for myself and let it suck for a while, as you said.
Mhm.
But I think so often what's hard is sitting in that feeling of like, okay, this sucks, because so often we're like, or at least for, oh, excuse me, at least for me, I found that sometimes I'm like, okay, let's just skip to the, yeah, I'm happy,
Right.
like this person isn't in my life anymore. But you forget to like, hey, that feeling sucks. Like you kind of forget to actually allow it yourself to feel it. So I think that was a really good point. I think
And
that was
it's
good.
often because
Yeah.
those feelings don't feel good. I personally cannot
Mm-hmm.
stand missing somebody. Missing somebody makes me uncomfortable. It makes me want to avoid that person at all costs. I hate missing people. So when you cut off somebody who, that was a good friend or a family member or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it may be, you're probably going to miss them at some point, even though you're aware of why you cut them off and it was necessary for you to do. You may still experience the human emotion of missing them. And I know for me, because I hate that emotion, I want to run from it. I don't want to miss you. I cut you
I
off for a
feel that.
reason. However, the more you run from it, all you're doing is delaying the fact that you have to feel it at some point. And
Yep.
so sometimes it just takes you sitting there and reminiscing on those good moments you're missing and remembering how much fun y'all used to have. And then
Mm-hmm.
after having that space, reminding yourself of why you made that decision and why you had to do what you had to do. And that, yes, y'all
Yeah.
had good times, but at the end of the day, you had to look out for you. But
Yeah.
I think when you don't give yourself the permission to kind of just sit with the feeling and just go with it for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
all you're really doing is delaying the inevitable at that. Because at some point you have to sit with it, whether you're
Yeah.
sitting with it at the healthy point where you're acknowledging your feelings and let the feelings pass, or you
Mm-hmm.
have to sit with a cluster of emotions because you have bypassed all of those emotions at one time, and now
Yeah.
they're all hitting you at once. So it's one thing
Yeah.
about emotions I'm learning is like they don't always make sense. They're not always rational, but they deserve your attention at the very least. They deserve recognition
Yeah.
of
I,
saying, "Hey, I see this feeling. I might not
mhm.
agree with it. I might not wish that I had it, but I have it, and it is what it is."
Yeah. I feel like that's one big thing for me when it comes up, when grief within healing comes up for me, is that I used to be the type of person who was like, okay, I'm a robot. I don't have feelings. I'm not going to feel this. I'm going to like, I'll write about this, but like, I'll write about it once and that's it. And that's not how we work as people. We feel things on different levels. So I kept running into the issue where those feelings kept resurfacing because it was like, hey, we haven't worked with this yet. So let's pop back up now. Like we haven't actually allowed ourselves to like process the impact that this person or this situation may have had. And so, like you said, the more you run from it, the more you're like, well, I'll it'll catch up to me at some point, and that can be a little bit overwhelming if it hits you all at once and you weren't prepared for it,
Yeah.
So I
I
think
think
like,
also don't realize that healing is not linear. Healing is really much of a cycle, and you just cycle and cycle and cycle.
Yes.
But just because I let myself feel those feelings once doesn't mean that I
Mm-hmm.
feel those feelings again. Like people,
Exactly.
I could come in contact with somebody who remind me of that person, and I miss them again. Like that, there's cyclical aspects to healing that I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that society at large makes space for. They just kind of make this
No.
that this person hurts you, you place the boundary, you move on. Okay,
Yeah.
no.
That's not consistent.
there's
That's
there's
not
a
the
lot of humanity that you're leaving out of
right.
that process.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that once you're compassionate with yourself, and it's very much easier said than done, but I
Mm-hmm.
think that there's a certain level of compassion you have to have for yourself, and understanding that I am a human and I have emotions, and that
Yes.
walking away from people, depending on how much they meant to me, is not going to be an overnight process by a long shot.
Exactly. How do you think that, in terms of what we were just speaking about, how do you think we should look, or not should, but how do you think you look at it from a long-term lens? So like, let's say you've gotten through those feelings and you've processed it and everything. Do you still have to actively tell yourself like, I made this decision for me? Like, do you have to actively like remind yourself why? Or do you think it's a lot
I
easier?
think I think the goal is acceptance.
Yeah.
In the sense of once you get to a point of acceptance of that person, of things having to end with that person, I
Mm-hmm.
don't really find myself reminding myself of like, this is why we had to walk away. It's just, I think a lot of that grieving process is denial. And that's part of
Mm-hmm.
grief, is the denial of, I can't believe I have to do this with this person.
Yeah.
And when, especially, it's not that time heals all wounds, but it is a
Mm-hmm.
matter of when it's fresh and you just placed that boundary. Those good moments still feel really good, and it's really
Yeah.
easy to leave those good moments and think, why am I doing this? We had such great times. We were able to laugh
Mm-hmm.
together. We have good chemistry. Why am I walking away? But as time goes on, and you're able to create some distance between you and that person, y'all's interactions, you're able to see, there was actually point. There was a point, and there was a reason why we had to
Yeah.
ways. Um, so
Yeah.
I think that the acceptance is what is important. Once you are able to
Mm-hmm.
fully accept this person and I just weren't a good match and it wasn't meant to be, you experience less of the constant reminding and having to, walk yourself through the mental process of why you had to
Mm-hmm.
do it and such.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. And when you were saying that, it made me think of the times where I found myself in a situation where I'm still in the process. Like I'll say this, like with my family, I had to actively like, it was a everyday type of thing where it was like, okay, you can't engage in certain situations with them because it's a trigger for you or it's no longer serving you. And that was different from looking at it from a long-term perspective now, where I can say, okay, there was that time period, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
now I'm in this space where I can have conversations, but I also know how to take care of myself if it becomes, overly uncomfortable for me, so to speak.
I can agree with
Um,
that.
oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying I agree with you. Go ahead. I'm listening.
Yeah. You said something that made me think of something really important. You said like the acceptance piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I think acceptance is really huge because for me, when I first started therapy, like the second time around, that was one of the words that came up for me. And it was like, you have to accept the things that have actually happened. Like, I think so
Mm-hmm.
often, especially from a societal standpoint, we refuse to accept a lot. I think we're
Absolutely.
more so in the stages of denial, and then we go back to, well, making excuses or justifications for that person's behavior or the
Mm-hmm.
situation's behavior. And that falls you back into that trap of like, well, this person has to be good for me because they were here for X, Y, and Z. But I think when you shift your perspective again and you look at it from the lens of, well, where was the reasoning or where was the point where I decided like enough was enough or something along those lines? And I think that that's a great space to actually kind of sit in just for a little bit. Like I said, this is called Let's Get Uncomfortable. So
Mhm.
healing is uncomfortable. It's not going to be linear. It's not going to happen overnight. And there are going to be times where you think about your past and you think about it mixed in with your present and you think about it mixed in with your future. But it's all about choosing moment by moment. It's not about looking so far ahead where it's like, okay, that's what I want
Mhm.
and this is the way that I'm going to get it. It's not again, it's not linear. There's no math equation to this. I think it's all about really having grace with yourself. Like I think, yeah.
When it comes to acceptance, I think that people have a hard time accepting two things. One,
Mm,
that someone so close to them could be harmful in a certain way.
yes.
And two, that they allowed someone to be that close to them who was
Yeah.
harmful. Especially when you're looking at friendships, long term
Mhm.
relationships. Have y'all been together for 10 plus, just years and years and
Yeah.
years, realizing that this person just isn't a good fit? It's very
Yeah.
hard to admit to yourself that sometimes the
Oh, I can't hear you. Cindy?
into. So,
Okay.
excuse me. Excuse me. The thing about acceptance, I think that people have a hard time accepting is the fact that um, when it comes to walking away from people who don't serve you, we have a
Mhm.
hard time accepting that we have allowed people into our space
Mhm.
that should not have been long term, and
Mhm.
we have a hard time accepting that somebody could hurt us repeatedly in these ways. I think a
Mhm.
lot of times when we have these long term bonds with people, we give them the benefit of the doubt. You don't want to believe that your best friend is jealous of you, or you don't want to believe that your partner of 5, 6 years doesn't want a long term partnership with you because they've been with you for so long. It's very easy for you to
Mhm.
deny certain parts of reality because you want to
Yeah.
believe and see the good in these people, but that's denial. That's not what's always taking
Mhm.
place. I think duality can exist. Yes, that person can be with you for a long time and not want to be with you long term. Yes, that
Yes.
person can be a best friend of yours and due to their own insecurities and their own personal issues be jealous of
Mhm.
you. Those things can exist, and I think that we end up hurting our own feelings by looking at people and not taking it for face value in that way because we're hoping that they're better than that,
Yeah.
and that does not aid in or lean towards acceptance at all. So when you finally get to the point where you realize I got to cut this person off, now you're having to not only accept that you have to cut them off now, but that you probably should a long time ago, and this person probably wasn't the best person to choose to invest in that long to begin with. It's
Exactly.
all very it's all a lot to have to accept at one time. So I
Mhm.
think that the grieving process we experience in these decisions is having to accept all of those things
At
at once.
once.
Really.
And
Yeah.
I think that was beautifully said. I think for me, I think you're absolutely right because like I said, when I first started therapy back up for like round 2, and this is probably within the past year because I was in therapy for like 6 or 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um on my 7th year of therapy, I had to talk about acceptance because I was healing from family situations and just my past and trying to build a better relationship with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to accept that a lot of harm was done to me as a kid. A lot of harm was done to me, in college, and so on and so forth. But
Mm-hmm.
each time acceptance came up, I was also angry with the actual situations and with the actual people involved in said situations because of, like you said, how close they were or how long it lasted. And I actually ended up working through this emotion with my therapist where we were talking about what is the main feeling that's coming up other than acceptance. When I say the word acceptance, what do you actually feel? I said, I feel kind of a sense of shame and embarrassment because yes, I was a kid during some of the time, like, majority of the time, but it's like that question comes up of how did I allow this to go on for so long? Like, how was
Mm-hmm.
I so self-aware and cognizant of what was actually taking place that I didn't speak up at that time. And I feel like that comes up with the grieving part as well, because it's like I have to grieve this situation, this person, whatever the situation may be, but I also have to accept that my role in it. I have to
Mm.
accept that maybe I contributed to this in some way. How did I allow for it to, go on for so long? So I think you're absolutely right about acceptance. That is
It is
definitely
definitely
powerful.
hard to accept your complicit behavior in
Yes.
someone's treatment of you. Because
Yeah.
sometimes it's so easy to point your finger at the other person and say, well, you're the one who betrayed me. You're the one who lied to me. You're the one. You're the one. But at some point in the separation, you begin to realize, okay, yeah, they did all those things, but I remain present for them to do all of that. So what does that
Yeah.
say about me? And I think that is that's a very hard look you have to have with yourself when you realize, of course, abuse aside,
Yeah.
but when you are with somebody who's toxic, whether it's dating, friendship, or whatever,
Yeah.
it really scary is a strong word, but it can be. It's scary how your brain will downplay and
That-
overlook very
yeah.
clear red flags and very clear mistreatment because you're more fixated on wanting to see the good in that person. And so when it's
Yes.
time for you to walk away, you now have to sit with the fact of, to an extent, I let a lot of this happen to me
Yep.
because the door was always open. I was
Yep.
my leaving was never in jeopardy. My safety was never in jeopardy to leave. So
Mhm.
what was I getting out of saying? We've all worn the clown beat. We have
Mhm.
all been there as far as giving one person way too many chances. And I know for
Yeah.
me, when I gave my last chance and I was done, I also had to mourn all those chances in the past that I gave that person when my gut was
Yes.
telling me that I shouldn't have done that. I
Yes.
ignored my gut and did it anyway because I was lonely or because I wasn't ready to give up or for whatever personal reason it was. That's very
Mhm.
hard to accept as well as when you betray yourself and you
Yeah.
know you did, but you don't want to admit that you did. At some point, you
Mhm.
have to admit it, and usually the admitting happens once they've been cut off and you're able to look at things objectively. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. But I think, like you said, from a societal standpoint, it's so much easier to be like, well, they did this in a situation, so I did this. It's kind of like rooted in pettiness
Mhm.
instead of peace.
Mhm.
Rooted in pettiness instead of peace, because I don't think pettiness is in any way, shape, or form a part of grief. I will say that. That's for me personally. I don't think it should be, but
Yeah.
sometimes
No.
people will put that in there, feeling the pettiness and put it in there while they're grieving. But for me personally, I can't do it, because for me, when I started experiencing the level of grief, it was like, yeah, it came up a little bit, but it was like, I ain't acting on it. I can't act on it,
Mhm.
because that's not ultimately going to give me peace. That's ultimately going to give me stress. So for me, it was about choosing peace over being petty and going back to, well, I could blame them for this, and this,
Mhm.
rather than me just looking at it from a reflective point of view and saying, well, look at the way you played a role in it. Unfortunately, it takes two people to be involved, or two or more people to be involved in whatever situation that we're walking away from.
Mhm.
And at some point, you were present enough to engage in it in some capacity. You know what I mean? It can't just be I'm the victim all the time. Not saying that I'm victim shaming or anything, but it
It's
could,
so tricky to
yeah,
talk about this without people assuming you're victim blaming. I don't see that as that at all. I think there is a difference between victim
yeah,
blaming and being able to pinpoint your role and how things happen. Because yes,
yeah,
there are situations where it's victim blaming, but there's a difference between that and this person is repeatedly hurting you.
mm-hmm,
They're showing you who they are, and you
yep,
refuse to believe them.
yep,
We're talking about two different things here, and I think
yeah,
I love women for real, but I have experienced a lot of times in trying to talk to women and getting us to see sometimes just because their actions were louder and more pronounced in their hurt towards you doesn't
mm-hmm,
mean you're innocent, doesn't mean you aren't hurting them, and it doesn't mean that you had no role in what's happening. Like I said, sometimes the woman's role is a lot more subtle. A lot of times
yeah,
our role can be passive aggressiveness. It can be
yep,
pettiness. It can be just being complicit and keeping access open to this person can be the main role we played. But those are
yeah,
still roles we're playing. And so
exactly,
I'm not saying that you deserve what happened to you. No.
Of course not.
But
Right, right.
there's also that accountability of, I felt that gut feeling early on in when they said that thing and my gut clicked
Hmm.
and I ignored that feeling. There's accountability
Exactly.
there. And I feel
There's,
like I wasn't able to really heal and grow until I stopped pointing fingers and looked at myself in
hmm
the eyes. Girl, you knew this person wasn't meant to be with you long term. You knew deep down, but
yes,
you ignored that feeling. But on top
yes,
of that, when it comes to pettiness and healing, I love a good petty moment. But at the same time, I think pettiness is directly correlated to emotional maturity in my mind. You
yes.
know,
I agree. I agree. That's what I
pettiness,
was gonna
I
say.
think the pettier you are and the more you feel the need to get back at somebody, you're not,
Hmm.
in my opinion, you're not focused on what's really at hand. If
No,
you hurt me and I know it's time for me to cut you off, what do I gain in trying to hurt you back? Okay, I hurt you.
exactly.
I still have the emotional damage I need to repair it and then move on
Yep.
from. I mean, hurting you really didn't do anything for me in the grand scheme of things, except temporary, even if it is temporary satisfaction, if that. So I
Hmm.
think that pettiness and grieving and healing, it can be a distraction more than it can
Yeah, of
an
course. Yeah,
actual
I don't.
portal
That's
of your own healing, you know?
yeah, and that's why I said I don't think that that part is a part of grief. I don't think that that part is a stage of grief because I think
Mhm.
so often from a societal standpoint, I see all the posts and stuff and all the things that talk about healing, but they never talk about like the nitty gritty part of this, where you're basically like, okay, I have to cut off people that I've been rocking with for like 10 plus years because they don't really, they're not on the same level, or meaning like they don't, or in some cases they want to like hold you back from being the person that you're trying to become. Like they're kind of interrupting your healing flow a little bit. I don't, if I could say that, but there's some level of you that's like, well, I could have a conversation with them about this. I could be petty. But again, that interrupts or disrupts your flow of self-discovery, healing, and actually getting to the root of like, okay, well, this is where this is coming from. And I think that when people are able to look at that from a standpoint of, okay, yeah, this continued for X amount of years and I was present, and really kind of look at that initial reaction of like, okay, well, how did I feel when I first met this person? You know what I mean? Like, what did I feel? What red flags were raising all over the place that I just chose to kind of turn a blind eye to because I wanted it to get better. I wanted to see the green flag instead. I wanted to make it a different color. You know what I mean? I think that's very important for us as people to be able to see. But I think that's where we lack, where it's like, I'm gonna turn a blind eye because I don't want that to be true. And like you said, the duality is heavy because I don't think a lot of people want to look at it from that lens of like,
Mhm.
there is a duality. I think a lot of people want it to be straightforward, like, no, you said you were going to be with me for this long, this amount of time, and this is what you said. So I'm going to want to hold you accountable to it. Not realizing that the duality is, it may exist where that person, like you said, may have been with you for a long time, but not actually want to be with you for a long time. Like
Mhm.
the longevity doesn't really necessarily mean anything in their eyes. And I think that's the hard part of looking at it.
I definitely think that people, accountability is like exercise. It's not fun to do.
Whew.
And most people will dodge that to take the easier route, which is pointing fingers and not factoring in their role in things. I think pettiness is another way to dodge that accountability, is
Oh yeah.
instead of, reflecting on what I did, I want to just really harp on how you hurt me and how
Mhm.
you must pay for your behaviors type deal.
Yeah.
Um, Dang, I had another thought that I wanted to mention. I totally just had a brain fart. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. That
Um,
happens to me too. That's what happened to me earlier, but
I
it came
hate
back
that.
around.
Um, I mentioned the pettiness. Hmm.
We
I
said
did.
grief, pettiness, acceptance.
I mean, completely left me. Wow.
Did it have anything to do with closure? Did it have anything to do with closure?
It
Or
could, well, we can talk about closure because I mean, when I say that thought is gone, it's gone. I don't know where it went, but it's
oh
gone. We
dang.
can't talk about closure.
I hate
Um,
when that happens. Dang.
it'll
It's
come
gonna
back
come
to me
back
at
to you
some
though.
point. I'm sorry about that, but
That's
yes,
okay.
I will say closure to me is something that people think they need and they don't.
I
Closure
know.
has
Let's
definitely
talk
been
about it. Let's get
um,
comfortable because I've had people personally come to me and ask me, "What do you think about closure?" I tell them straight up, it doesn't exist. And
yeah,
I say that from a personal standpoint because I used to be a person that was like, I need closure. I need closure. I need closure. I'll tell you what happened. The one time I got closure, I broke my own heart because I felt like I needed closure. And I restarted the emotional abuse that I was ready to walk away from
hmm
unintentionally because
hmm
I was like, oh, closure. Perfect. They can come over. We can have a conversation. Yeah, we had that conversation, but I was right back in the middle of emotional confusion,
exactly,
mental manipulation. And it was like,
exactly.
I could have avoided all this if I hadn't have invited you over.
Yep.
So I personally don't believe in closure. I think your closure comes from you.
hmm
And I think from a societal standpoint, it's always like, well, don't you need closure with that person? Don't you think that that person, you meant a lot to them too, and they meant a lot to you? So don't you guys think you should meet in the middle and get closure? Uh, I think closure is a way of trying to reopen that box and trying to restart the situation. It's trying to it's a guise, it's a mask so that they can have access to you again and it can start back up again because that's honestly what happens whenever closure is involved. It's not real. It's not real.
Absolutely. I think people hope that closure does more than what it's supposed to. But the
Mm.
reality is, no amount of closure is going to undo the work you have to do for yourself.
Woo.
So, no amount of hearing what you want them to say so bad is
Yes.
going to make the work you need to do to move on vanish. It's just not going to work
It's
that way.
not. It's not.
And I've had the quote unquote closure where I've had people tell me exactly what I wanted to hear. And I've had that moment of like, relief
Mhm.
of like finally I'm getting the apology or I'm getting the
Yeah.
accountability that I've been begging for you to give me.
Mhm.
And right after that feeling passes, all of their trauma, all their bullshit was sitting right there for me to have to work through. And
Yep.
it just showed me that there's just it's not closure isn't magical.
No.
Closure is not going to evaporate what you have to work
Mm-mm.
on. So you really don't.
No.
And I've also experienced not having closure and having to create my own answer and create my own experience, um,
Yeah.
and move on from that too. And guess what? I moved on. I think that people look to closure to do everything but be actual closure.
Mhm.
Like you're saying, people are looking to closure to. I do think that people kind of nudge at closure as a way to keep the door open. Uh,
Yeah.
as in, like I'm not really ready to be done yet, but I'm trying to see if they ready to be done. That kind of deal. And
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
think it is kind of wasted time.
It definitely is.
It's
100%.
a potential for you, like you said, feelings because especially if you're going into that closure looking for only a certain answer. I don't think people
Mhm.
realize that sometimes closure comes with, well, I don't know why I did that. Imagine that. Imagine you
Exactly.
want to know, why did you do this? Why did you cheat on me? Whatever the case may be. And you ask them and their answer is, well, I don't know. I don't really have an answer for that.
Exactly.
Now what?
I
So I think that we tend to
Yeah.
go into closure only looking for one answer. And when we don't
Mhm.
get that answer, we don't feel any better. And that's because, and even when you get that answer, you still don't feel much better. So I just don't think that
Exactly.
closure is necessary for you to heal, for you to move on, for you to progress. It is
Yeah.
this fantasy that rom coms and TV have
Talk
turned into
about
this
it.
amazing like rush of
Yes.
emotion that doesn't actually exist in real life.
It doesn't. Because I feel like I said, I just think that so often, especially when you're in a state of mind where you're at the point, especially when you are, depending on how far along in your healing journey you are, if you're first starting out, you're more than likely to want to be like, yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. But then when you
Mhm.
get involved in it or when you're actively like in the midst of trying to get closure, you kind of, or at least for me, I realized that it didn't exist when I was in the middle of getting it because it was like you said, I was asking why, but I kept getting I don't knows. And I was asking how, and I kept getting I don't know. I just did. Like, and that hurt even more because it's
Mhm.
like, I thought you cared. So you must not care if you can't give me an answer, but that's not always the case. I found that my relationship with closure changed the moment that I realized sometimes you just don't get closure from everyone. And you have
Mhm.
to give that answer to yourself. Your answers that you're looking for are within.
Yep.
Usually. Usually.
I
But
definitely agree with that. I think that
yeah.
and the way I see it is honestly, depending on how you treated me, I don't want your answer. I'm gonna make I'll make it my own and move on with it.
Yes,
I think
exactly.
that people are so clingy, or not clingy, but they're so focused on wanting their answer.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, a lot of times their answer is not an answer that you want anyway. So if I had to choose between making up my own answer and taking your answer, I'm making my own answer. Then shoot, if you cheated on me, it's because you ain't shit.
Exactly.
I don't even want to
Exactly.
know what other reason might have been. In my mind, it's because you ain't shit. And I can move on. You know, I don't think that. I think
Exactly.
that people they give way too much power in closure and not
Yeah.
realizing that the answer is within you,
Yeah.
and you can decide what that answer is for your narrative. But I think that in times of walking away from people who we don't want to walk away from, we
Uh-huh.
don't want to do it. We don't want to do it. We don't want to. We
No,
want to leave that with that door open. We want to give them access to just if I
just a
give you
little bit.
if I hit you up to give you some closure, maybe then you'll see that I'm really about to leave, and we
Exactly.
look at
Maybe.
closure to be more of a key than a
Hmm.
lock, if anything.
Oh, I like
Um,
that. I like that. But
yeah.
I think that that makes a lot of sense because especially when you're looking at it from that standpoint of like, I know I'm done, and I know that I 100, 1,000% know that I'm done because I've done this myself. I've done this with an individual a lot of times at this point where I have said, I have like replayed the situation in my head, have thought about it, and literally asked my ancestors, why did we just do that? Why did we just entertain this person in our space again? What is going on? Just to come up with the answer of I'm done. Like this is it. I'm walking away. But to have a little piece of me say, oh well, we can have a conversation about it because I owe them that much. And I think that's where the whole closure and grief come together. They intertwine because a lot of times we can be holding on to, okay, well, they mean so much to me. And I'm sure that I mean that much to them because we've been doing this for X amount of time, but again, the reality is sometimes that closure just doesn't exist. Like closure is just not real. Cause I've had this conversation. We have this conversation repeatedly where I'm not getting the outcome. Like the outcome is just not changing. My mind is still set on, okay, I'm walking away because you're just not seeing it. And like you said, sometimes you got to come up with your own narrative, like, well, your own reasoning. And I think that that was beautifully said. Like I said, let's get uncomfortable, y'all, because we gonna talk about it. We gonna talk about it. Like these feelings that we often have that kind of keep us in the throes of like, okay, well, this person is. First of all, I think the things that keep us attached to someone or involved in situations that we know are no longer serving us and that keep us from making that distance is the longevity, for one, because we see like, oh, they've been in our lives for 5+ years. We automatically look at it as wasted time. But if we
Mhm.
shift our perspective to looking at it from the lens of that wasn't wasted time, that was just showing you what you didn't need and what you don't want, then we're able to kind of look at it from like, yeah, I don't want that. I choose me. You know what I mean? Like I don't want that. I don't care what your answer is. But if we're looking at it from the standpoint of like, oh, well, how could it be this way, and let's see about what if this and what if that, then that's what causes you to kind of like go backtrack and things like that. And I think that that's huge because we don't think about it like that. At least I haven't seen many people thinking about it from that perspective.
I would say I actually have a counterpoint because
Hmm.
you're mentioning about being with someone long term not being a waste of time.
Yeah.
I would argue that if you're being with a person long term, and the reason why you were with them was for so long was because you were waiting to get to a point where things got good, and
Hmm.
you had to end before getting to that good point, it was
Yeah.
waste time. You wasted your time. You did. If the reason
Yeah.
why you wanted to keep them around is because, oh, we've spent X amount of years together, I don't want to give all that up for somebody else to reap the benefits. That means that you haven't seen the benefits you want to see yet, and you're hoping that the investment of your time will give you that benefit. You
Yeah.
wasted your time. You did. That means that you have bypassed. I mean, just hearing how people the reason why someone doesn't want to let somebody go tells me a lot about the quality of that relationship. It's one
Yeah.
thing to say that the connection was everything. If you don't want to let them go because y'all had a bond and you're talking about the quality of that relationship, that's
Yeah.
one thing.
Yeah.
People who talk about the quantity and that's the primary thing you're talking about in that partnership, it lets me know that there wasn't much value in it. And that,
Mm.
yeah, the part of the reason why you feeling like you're wasting your time is because you did. It's because you
Yeah.
looked at your time as the investment to getting what you deserve in treatment, and you went all that time not being treated properly. That was a waste of your time. And I think that
Nope. I agree.
when we look at
I
it that
agree.
way, I think that people need to. This is one reason that not this is kind of off topic, but choosing wisely up front and dipping early
Mhm.
is such a lifesaver because time is not infinite for us; it's finite.
Mhm.
So you can't afford to look at your time as the investment to then receive what you deserve to receive in treatment. And I think people
Exactly.
look at that as their investment. And so when it comes time for them to realize this person doesn't serve me and I should walk away,
Mhm.
those feelings of waste of time are valid because yeah, you have
Yeah.
invested this much time into a partnership, into a friendship, into whatever the case may be, and you've gotten virtually nothing in return. That sucks.
Exactly.
That's a
That
hard
does
pill to
suck.
swallow.
Like you said, let it suck for a while. Let it suck
Yeah.
for a while. Like if you exactly what you're saying. Like if you know that you've been in a situation or a friendship that you know is not serving you and it's been for X amount of years and that's the first thing you think about, I wholeheartedly agree with you, Cindy, because I usually look at it from the standpoint of the memories that we shared, the bond,
Mhm.
the connection, whatever the case may, whatever it is, it may be, and then the time comes into play. But that's usually what can make someone stay if they think about the time that they have put in, that
Mhm.
investment, because they're like, well, I don't put in so much time, and they don't see it from the way that you're saying as, oh, it's a wasted, they don't see it from that lens. They see it from, oh, I done already put so much time, so what's 10 more? What's 5
Mhm.
more? What's 3 more? You know what I mean? They don't see it from that perspective. So that's why I said grief is really hard to navigate when it comes up in healing, because it's like you don't want to have to mourn that person. You don't want to have to mourn the situation. And I wholeheartedly agree, but this is probably why a lot of people are like, I know that I need to do this in order to do what's best for me, but I'm just hesitant to do it right now. And I can see both sides, and I definitely can. Hell,
I
three
also would
sides.
I would also argue that you control just how much grief you experience
Exactly.
because and it kind of ties into walking away sooner.
Yeah.
Women we're socialized and conditioned to wait until we are depleted of damn near everything to then leave somebody.
And we don't have
And
to.
we don't have to, but I think that we don't realize how much of a detriment that does to our well-being moving forward. You don't
Yeah.
have to wait until you're at E because the grief that comes with being depleted to that point from somebody and then leaving, that is a pain. It's painful. It makes you not want to do it, makes you not want to connect to anybody versus
Exactly.
the grief of having to live up to somebody that you only gave 6 months to. You know what I mean? And I think
Mhm.
that people don't realize that the grieving period and phase varies depending on how long that connection and how much access you give somebody, which is why you should be really big. I'm very big on self-preservation.
Me
Preserve
too.
yourself in connecting to people and connect to those that are the best investment to connect in because
Mhm.
that minimizes the pain and minimizes the grieving once you have to if you have to let them go.
Exactly.
But investing into the wrong people for too long creates unnecessary pain that I don't
Yes,
think
it
people realize.
does.
Yeah.
And I think especially when we're talking about navigating life, I don't think a lot of us, especially if we're talking like from a young age, like in high school and going on to college, I don't think a lot of us see it as the investment that it is until A, we begin therapy, or
Mhm.
B, something happens where our mind shifts, our perspective shifts, and you see it from that lens of, dang, yeah, that wasn't necessarily the best option for me, or I could have chose differently, you know. And like you said, it's a cyclical thing, so it goes right back to what you said. You're accepting your involvement, your role in it. It's crazy. It's crazy that everything goes back around, and you see it from different lenses, and you see how everything adds up. Like I said, healing is in no way, shape, or form linear, but
Mm-hmm.
definitely can circle back around to some feelings that you had before, and the situations. I keep seeing this thing where if you don't learn the lesson the first time, you're going to keep having that lesson.
Yeah.
And I feel like in my life personally, my big lesson has always been to choose myself in terms of like whatever situation, doesn't matter what situation it is, meaning like if someone is disrespecting me, I need to choose myself. I cannot
Mm-hmm.
be a people pleaser. Can I go back to those old ways where it was like, well, why are they disrespecting me type of thing, you know, wanting to know more so what is causing the disrespect from them versus me just putting up with it, you know, or me defending myself and choosing me in that moment. And I think this is this kind of leads into the next episode, but basically I think when it comes to creating that distance with situations and people that no longer serve you, you have to be willing to say, okay, I am choosing me at this
Mm-hmm.
point in time also. And that's going to be like a huge turning point.
I
Like,
think the hard thing for people to do is choose themselves because
yes, it is.
we're socialized to self-sacrifice, especially women. I keep going back to women because
No, I get it. I think, I
we be
mean, let me
going through
ask
it
you.
on the low. But I
No,
think
no.
that we are conditioned to abandon ourselves for the
Yes, that's
greater
what I was going
good.
to ask you.
What was the question? Go ahead.
How do you feel when you see it that you know, because we see this all the time, especially as women. I will never forget. So okay, I'll ask the question, but I'll frame it first. So I remember I had a therapist who I was in a situation with an now ex of mine or whatever. And I remember being so fed up with the situation. I was so hurt. I was like, this is whatever it was. I just wasn't here for it anymore. I was way over it. And my
Mm-hmm.
therapist told me, why not teach them? Why not show them? And I got so fed up because it was like, that's not what I'm here for. I can't just keep teaching and waiting. And you know what I mean? That's why I'm in therapy in the first place. Like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so how do you feel when you see all those different situations and scenarios come up where women have been told to, um, what did you say? This kind of self-sacrifice for their partner or their man or whichever the case.
It's it's like being in the twilight zone. Going from doing it myself because that's what I was socialized to do. You know, you just
Mm-hmm.
stifle your emotions and do whatever you people pleasing and all that stuff. To
Mm-hmm.
unlearning it and walking away from it. What the saddest part to me is women who are stuck doing it and don't see the problem, who think that the self-sacrifice is normal or that means that makes them a good woman, and it's like, babes, you
Yep.
are a victim.
That's the clown mask
Self-sacrifice,
right
and
there. So you want to talk
I
about
think
clown mask? That's part of the clown mask right there because
absolutely
I
is
mean
thinking that
you
you
don't even want to
are
see what you're doing is wrong for you.
okay.
You would much rather appease him or appease her than to help your own damn self. I'm just saying that's different.
It is
That's
very
completely different.
sad. I think I had to accept that you can't save everybody. You know, you really can't.
You cannot save
Some people are just
everybody.
they are stuck in their ways. They are stuck in their mindset of, doing what they've been doing and they ain't trying to do nothing different. And
Yeah.
um I don't know. I do my best on my content and in my podcast to advocate for
Hmm.
people to stop doing it.
Yeah.
However, I fully accept that you can't control what they do. But I just think
No.
that self-sacrifice is and self-abandonment is something that we are conditioned to do to where we don't even realize. There have been times where I have abandoned myself and had to catch me. Like, wait a minute, girl, what happened to you? It does take practice to
It
begin
does.
remembering yourself in the process, because
Hmm.
we are conditioned to just not. But there's so much that you gain in peace And it's
Mhm.
funny because the human reality is that a lot of the emotional roller coaster and back and forth of being with somebody toxic is exciting, it's thrilling. There's a certain level of suspense,
Yeah.
uncertainty. We find excitement in that uncertainty of, well, if I do this thing, will that work? Will that win them over? And that we will
Mm.
lock into that uncertainty and the quote unquote excitement of the uncertainty, to where that seems more enticing and exciting than the peace of certainty. And
Yeah.
so it's interesting to watch human behavior and watch the amount of us who are just, you know what, I'm cool with boo thing over here who don't know how to act, because the suspense of maybe they'll get it together is so much more enticing to me than
Yeah.
the certainty of finding somebody who already has it and already wants me type deal.
Exactly. And
And
that's
and that's part of the
mind
human
blowing. Oh, I said that's mind blowing.
sorry, we fish at the same time. Yes, it's part of the human experience, and I can't say that I fault us for it when you factor in up home a home upside wow home upbringing. When you factor
Yeah.
in society's display and portrayal of love and companionship and everything,
Mhm.
it's not surprising that so many of us have a warped sense of what healthy companionship, regardless of like romantic or platonic, means. But I, yeah, I think that self sacrifice is a huge part of that. We are taught to
Yeah.
not worry about our needs and focus on convincing them that we're worth of something. And that is one of the worst ways that has the most damaging impact. That's where, the fuck love, I don't want to try no more. Y'all
Yeah.
all playing. Are they
Yeah.
playing you, or did you play yourself? Like that has
Yeah.
to come into contact at some point.
Exactly. I think you're right. I think you're right. That was beautifully said too.
Thank you.
I think that when we look at it from like a collective, that collectively speaking of, okay, how do we actually implement these boundaries and create this distance, and have to do that knowing that it's for ourselves. It gets a lot easier when you look at it from a full picture versus looking at it from the little details, at least I think,
Mm-hmm.
because I of course have to take it day by day, right? But when you look at it from the bigger picture, you see it like overall, this is going to be good for me. But when I look at it from an individual aspect of like, oh, this is the memories, this is the time, this is this, that kind of, like I said, it makes you go back to be like, well, wait a minute, why am I actually giving all this up? And that's where, you go back into that circle again. But grieving it with while healing is definitely a challenge that does come up. It is one of the obstacles that does come up with healing. I've had to grieve relationships and friendships that I didn't think I was ever going to have to mourn. I didn't think I was ever going to have to process the thought of them leaving because of but this goes back to like when I was unhealed at the time. I had a friendship that was in my like we were friends for like 10 plus years, and I was like, there ain't no way that she ever gonna leave. There ain't no way she's ever gonna betray me. There ain't no way that this is this and this. And so lo and behold, that happened. And I
Mm-hmm.
had to kind of sit with the duality of like, well, maybe, I had to look at it from all different perspectives. First of all, from her perspective and mine. Then I had to look at it from the reality of how is it going to either not benefit me, but like, what's it going to do to propel me, I guess, so to speak. And then you had to look at it from another perspective of like, is it really a loss? Is it
Mm-hmm.
really a bad thing that I'm putting distance between me and this individual when I look at it from this perspective? And I think that sometimes it's okay to analyze some things when you're grieving. It's okay because
The analyzation though is probably one of the most important parts of the grieving process for many
yeah,
people, because
yeah,
it does take you. It's painful to look at that person
yeah.
objectively, not through the rose-colored glasses of
Mhm.
loving that person. But it does help you to realize a lot of times people you're walking away from you that was necessary, and
It
it's
was
you're not able
necessary.
to fully accept that when you're still looking at them through the. But we were best friends
Mhm.
for years. It's hard to. and it's understandable. That's part of the human experience of emotions. It's hard. It's easy to latch on to that was my home girl. We want to have kids and we want to raise our kids together. They're going to become best
Yeah.
friends. Like we all have that kind of, thought
Yeah.
process. But part of grieving is, of course, grieving what could have been, but also grieving. Sometimes I think our gut intuition knows that that's not going to be long term, and we're saying things like, "Oh, that's my girl. She ain't going nowhere." But deep down, we have this feeling like something is off, and
Yeah. I've had
having
that
to
happen, and
grieve
I've thought,
is going back
but
to all of those moments where you
yeah.
felt something and realizing, "Dang, I was right," and having to sit with that. Um, it
Or
sucks.
let's
You don't want to
or
realize that.
exactly. And let's talk about the fact that let's get uncomfortable. But let's talk about the fact when everybody around you is telling you this person is not for you. This
Yeah, boy.
situation is not for you. But don't it sound like, why does it sound like it's your gut in human form telling you
Yep.
this situation is not for you? But what are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you entertaining it? Why are you but
Those are
I think
very hard to move on from because when it's
woo,
your homegirls, your family, everyone's against you and that person being together.
but you
And
know in your heart, like you know in your gut, like, no, I
yep,
feel something.
yep. And I think
I'm
at that point, that's just a situation of ego and pride.
yeah.
You don't want for everyone else to be right in that sense.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why you hang on so long is because you think you
Mhm.
prove everyone wrong. And all you doing, baby, wasting your time because we all know you right. And deep down, they right. You know how you're feeling. We're all in on the same feeling.
I
But you're
can't
just
even
so
tell you. Oh my gosh. I can't tell you how my friends just be like, I mean, I have very supportive friends now. I really do. I cherish them. They know that. But when I had to, like, when I was talking with them about my situation, they was like, listen, I'm gonna tell it to you straight because ain't nobody else telling it to you straight. You need to leave. You need
hmm
to leave and you need to
hmm
just go. And if you need help with keeping yourself accountable to what you want to do now, I'm here. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
I think it's hard when you have those situations, especially as a woman, because our ego, our
Our ego
pride. I don't know if
definitely,
it's our ego
yeah.
or our pride. One of
I
the
would say
two.
it's a combination of both. Our
Yeah.
egos and pride. We don't like being wrong anyway. But we
There you go.
especially don't want to be wrong about the person we chose romantically because I mean, there's so much pressure in dating to get it right,
Yeah.
to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that whoever you choose, they're treating you the top notch, it's the best of the best, whatever, whatever. So
Yeah.
and not only that, but your dating style and who you choose romantically shows and tells people a lot about how you feel about yourself. And
That's true.
so when you bring around somebody and this person is not up to par, that person is an outward display of what's happening with you internally. And
Yes. Oh my God.
that can be a really
That
hard thing to have
mhm.
to accept when no one around you accepts an extension of you. you know
Exactly.
so I think that that's where that rejection comes from. It's like, by rejecting my partner, you're rejecting me, and I don't like
Yeah.
that. So I'd
And I'll
rather double
hmm
down and remain hell bent that this person is meant for me than have to accept that this person is an indication that I'm not okay with myself. I think that's
exactly.
another big part that we don't talk about either.
Yeah. I didn't even think of I think me being self-aware, I have thought about that, but I have also like dismissed it so quick. The moment that it comes up, it's like, nah, I'm good. I'm good.
hmm hmm
And but then you look at the situations that you're in, actively engaging in, and you look at it from a standpoint of, no, I'm actually not. Like, if
hmm
I were good, I wouldn't be engaging in X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
And I think that's difficult for us as a collective to look at it. That's
Absolutely.
definitely hard.
It's a very hard pill to swallow, and that's one of the things when it's hard when you're the friend watching your loved one be with somebody
Uh-huh.
who's good for them. It's because you are witnessing how they feel about themselves in real time, and it's easy to
Yeah,
talk yourself up with your girlfriends. I always say that when it comes to girl friendships, you learn a lot about your girlfriends based on who they date, because people who that have high self-esteem, high self-value, and love themselves don't entertain certain bullshit. We ain't affiliating with it. We don't want no parts of it, no whatsoever. And
that's
it's
true.
real easy when y'all are all single to talk the same talk. But when it comes
Mm-hmm.
down to who you actually choose, I learn a
Mm-hmm.
lot about you as a woman and as a friend based on who you choose romantically. And it's a very hard pill to swallow when you see that your friend doesn't properly value themselves based on who they're involved with. And
Yeah.
um, I think that's where the rejection comes from. It's a rejection of self, because if you don't like my partner, you don't like my choice. And that was my choice.
And that was my choice. Like he didn't, or
Exactly.
they didn't. Yeah, yeah. No, I get that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's wow. I no, like I said, I would think about that and then I'd be like, no, I just dismiss it. I would dismiss it
Yeah.
so quick. But I see what you mean because like even when certain friends of mine were dating, whoever they were dating, I would be like, I don't like them for you. You deserve
Mhm.
better. And now I see that, like, I see where you're coming. Yep, I get it. I get it. I got it.
It's unfortunate because as the friend, you do want them to deserve. You do feel that they deserve better. You
Yeah.
want better for them, but your friend is hearing, "I reject you and your choice. That wasn't
Yep.
a good choice. You should do. You should have done better than that."
You
And I think
exactly right.
that that's where we get that defensive response from the
Where
distance,
I'm gonna
all of
hold them
that,
10 toes. Yeah, that 10 toes
because
down
they're
type of
insulted.
mentality because you
Exactly.
don't want to. Yep. But
Exactly.
also I think, like you said, I think it boils down to I don't want to admit that I'm not in a good headspace right now
Yep.
or that I am actively seeking this out. But like I said, I have good friends. My friends have definitely told me, it was like, what, no, we not doing this. Like they'll even, shift the conversation into something lighter because when I was
Mhm.
entertaining bullshit,
Mhm.
when I was
Mhm.
entertaining bullshit, it would be, you could see that, that exudes from of you, that exudes off of you, like the way that you involve with people or whatever, you carry that.
Right.
So basically the conversations would shift from, okay, we just not, I basically didn't no longer wanted to talk about dating and wanted to talk about going after like our career goals and things like that. That really lit a fire under me, and
Mhm.
podcasting and things like that.
Mhm.
So I do realize, like, there was, like, as you're speaking about this, I do realize that there were some shifts and some conversations, but like I guess I never looked at it from the perspective of like that's actually how you feel about yourself, and
Mhm.
that's a bitter pill to swallow. But
Yeah.
hey,
That's
it's
all.
let's
That's
get
I
uncomfortable.
learned all those
Which,
things through grieving healing.
man, through grieving
Absolutely.
healing,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
feel like this topic is just so, like I said, it's super super special because I haven't seen many podcast episodes about it. I haven't heard anyone really vocalize what the hard part of healing is, and this is honestly one of those pieces for real, because it's not even
Absolutely.
just that you're grieving that person. I've been thinking of it from a standpoint of I'm grieving my old self, you know what I mean, that unhealed version of self that was entertaining bullshit or entertaining less than what I deserve.
Mhm.
And you have to actually mourn, like, yeah, at one point we was on some bullshit, at one point we was doing this one,
Mhm.
and like you said, that's a bitter pill to swallow because it's not that easy to come on and navigate.
We all want to be perfect, even though we know we're not, and have to admit that, like, oh no, we was imperfect as hell at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I have
Unhealed.
ran
I
from
say
that truth.
unhealed, but imperfect is cool too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I like unhealed. Well, I would say imperfect because I know with me being a recovering people pleaser, it was my goal to
Mm.
be perfect. It was my goal to perform perfection to the best of my abilities and
Yes.
withhold all my imperfections. But at this point, I recognize that I'm perfectly imperfect and that I am designed to have imperfections by design. Like I have no choice but to be imperfect, and
Yeah.
that is what makes me perfect. So that's how I just look
Mm-hmm.
at it. But
No, I
I
like
do
that.
think that um, all of us, we all say, nobody's perfect. We all say that saying, but
Mm-hmm.
very few of us believe that for ourselves. We'll say it for other
Exactly.
people, and then hold us
Exactly.
ourselves to very unrealistic expectations that just
Yeah.
aren't realistic in the grand scheme of things. So
Yeah.
we're all secretly striving for perfection, although we know it isn't realistic and obtainable, and hurting our
Mm-hmm.
feelings when we can't meet it. So I think the goal is to get to a point where you stop holding those kind of expectations on yourself and realize you can't meet them, and to
Exactly.
be more have more grace for yourself and more compassion and understanding that if you're doing your best and being self-aware and being accountable when you do drop the ball. That's
Mm-hmm.
what the human experience is, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Yeah. I think you're right. Absolutely. I think with time comes learning if you allow it in every situation, in every aspect of healing and in every aspect of life. There comes I'm very poetic. So I always see like there's a lesson, but I know I was talking about that. I feel like if you don't learn your lesson, you always repeat it, right? Until you do learn it. What's interesting is that at the time when I wasn't allowing myself to learn the lesson, I would get so angry and I'd be like, just tell me what the lesson is.
Yeah.
Just tell me what the
Why
lesson
I keep
is.
meeting the same person? Just tell me what it is.
I remember being so angry. I told my best friend, I was like, listen, I just need you to tell me the lesson. Just give it to me straight.
Hmm.
And she said some of the realest stuff when I asked her. She said, I can't tell you what you need to learn. I can only show you that this is not for you. And
Hmm.
you have to actively choose to learn the lesson. You have to actively choose what the lesson is. And I was like,
It's
damn,
absolutely right.
damn,
Absolutely
you
right.
absolutely right. Cause I thought you was just gonna put it in black and white. Here's the lesson, baby. Choose yourself and go on. But that's not the lesson. Sometimes the lesson in especially in life and healing, and especially with when we're talking about grieving and healing at the same time, sometimes the lesson really is continuously choose yourself, even when it
Mhm.
gets hard, because because who you gonna have? Who like so many of us always talk about we don't want to be alone and we don't like, but who else do you have in this world? You, other than you.
Not only that is that sometimes the answer, but sometimes the answer is the problem is you, and your
Yeah.
friends can't tell you that. Like,
No, exactly. But if you realize it with your self awareness, you'll be better prepared to use the tools and resources to discover why that part of the problem was you.
hmm,
And
yeah,
I think, like I said, we I could talk about this for hours, but I really appreciate you for being on the episode. Like this was super special. Do you have anything else that you want to share? Any other things that you want to discuss other than what we just talked about, or anything?
I can plug my socials if you don't mind.
That is totally fine. Go ahead.
Great. If you guys want to follow and hear more of my content, follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at the Cindy Noir. It's the same at across socials. If you want to check out my podcast, I am on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. My show is called Can We Talk About It? I will begin posting weekly shortly. Right now it's bi-weekly, but I'm working on it. So y'all
Listen,
tune in if you would like to hear more of what I have to talk about, because I'll be talking about a lot and I would love for y'all to share. But thank you so much, Queen, for having me on your show. This was a great topic and I look forward to it publishing. I'm so excited.
me too. You are so welcome. Thank you again for your support. I really appreciate it. And thank
Absolutely.
you.
You have a great podcast on your hands and I can't wait to see it flourish and continue to excel and be excellent.
Thank you so much for that. That means so much coming from you. Oh my gosh.
Oh, you're welcome.
Because truth time, I've been doing my podcast for a while, but like it's hard. I see all the posts that you make about like how it's easy to want to give up and everything. And
Mhm.
I feel the same way. That's what I really did want to share that with you. I definitely do feel that same way sometimes. But thank you guys for listening. This has been Queen J with Let's Get Uncomfortable. You guys can always, as always, follow me on Instagram at officially Janae H. I do have the Patreon under the same name, and be on the lookout for more episodes and more collaborations. Thank you for seeing and hearing me. Peace.